Yeah. Might be live. It's always Twitch taking its YouTube seems online. Twitch. Since yeah, okay. So good afternoon from Toronto. Um, since my last stream, I have only done marketing work, so sample scene here. I will keep working on the game itself, not manually arranged scene. So I'll be closing a bunch of scenes here in Godot. So the goal is to give the player a chance to lay things out automatically, but in the game context, scene that I have arranged, but we should be able to do something like. Speaking of which, here's where we are so far. We have basic game world. This all has to change, of course. The player will want to put a tool in the scene. This data is all dummy data. Let's say if it's a tomato plant, right now we are simulating a buy button, so the player will interact with the scene, place the tomato. And of course, this is an eggplant plant. So nothing is fitting together right now. We are working out the workflow, game mechanics, so that this will have to be the correct plant. It will also be a seedling, most likely, or just seed. So you won't actually see fully grown eggplant. So there's a lot to do, but this is the basic process. So where we left it off this time was this preview logic. This viewport. Okay, fine. So I have a more or less defined plan, well-defined plan, but things sort of change as I go. So let me just run the game. So last time we did this data model, keeping a Google spreadsheet or multiple to hold the data, and then writing a script and combining the data into a big JSON file. We are now able to pull individual items. Of course, now the missing link here is that these models, these item names, are not matched to models. I said there's just an eggplant model. Let's look at the not here, it's the egg itself. So let's start from planting panel. The buy pressed is firing an event, and we are actually triggering the preview. And I think there is a preview scene, if I recall, is inside. This scene has a script which is responsible for showing plant model. This has to be made dynamic so that it shows the correct model. Which brings us to an important decision point. Let me pull the folder here, displace the number models. Arugula, bean speed. So these all have to be exported to Godot. Then let me open one of them. One tomato plant has multiple phases. Let's start the seedling, then we will move to growing phase. This guy keeps getting big. Now, it's nice to look at fully grown tomato. Oh, by the way, these other collections have to be scaled down because I think initially their scale was, say, this seedling is half a meter. It's just so if anything, it should be just half a cent. Um, of course, the anticlimactic part there. Oh, it's nice to look at a fully grown tomato, but when the player plants it, not be planting it. This looks pretty, and they will most likely plant something like this. So at the very least, when I export individual collections here, I have to come up with a naming convention that we know the phase name, and that when we say, okay, plant tomato, actually mean the seedling, not the fully grown. There will be transition between these stages as the game. I'm gonna look at other files here because I think we have not kept the same thing. I this says fully grown fruit bear. Let's look at this one. Says fully grown fruit bearing phase. Before that is fruit bearing unripe. We don't have unripe ripe phases for. I think what we could do is sort of like an array logic. We have 5 or 6 phases. The phases are represented. Say 0 is always the seedling. Sometimes the array will have 6 phases, and the last one will always be withered state. That way, in the game, we can always check in which phase we are, comparing against the the minimum being the 0, and then the final state being the length of the array. Then this naming convention. And if you want to introduce an in between state later, all we have to do is to add another index into shaded with a new model or the phase of the scale all this down. It's 10 meters tall. So there's going to be a lot of mundane work. Ideally, I create a pipeline that actually does this so that I don't waste time. doing it. That is the most, because I think the next step is this, is to, I may as well actually open this Firefox, some application when it comes to manage all accounts on Google Drive. This is for it. Here's the vegetables spreadsheet. We have the separate sheets here for the vegetable types. This has to be based on, let's at least do that. So we will have arugula. This is all actually garbage data. Maybe we'll have only one variety. I think I'll start with this one. Let's call this sun. We decide to go with asterisk wider. This is good for you. The reason why asterisk is important is because of that we are using that character for the array separator. So these two values will be an array. So, and this is going to be a string. There is actually a code here. If you want to export a string, you put it in double quotes. But then we have comma as the normal array separator, and it thinks of the comma as separate sentences. So everything was mixed up. So I'm going with my custom array separator, and I no longer have to put strings in quotes, double quotes. So everything looks clean enough. So we will have kale in this game. We'll have arugula. This we got some model. And this is generic enough that I don't need to just arugula kale. Arrange it based on the file system. See here, so we will have beans. Now, if I recall, I think I asked the designers to come up with two different beans. One, let me open the file. Yeah, I think this conversation was for beans versus green peas. So, like this. I think we wanted to go with Romano beans. Red bean. This guy is 11 meters tall. Have some work. Either way, this is just one. I may later create variations, different types of beans, but they will all be under their eye. Here, beet. Interesting question. When it comes to certain words in English, are they always plural or beet versus? I think it's beet. And I think when you talk about beans, there's rarely one bean. Broccoli. cabbage. And again, green cabbage, red cabbage, they will all be very, even for the green cabbage, I mean carrots, that will actually be just carrot. And cauliflower, celery. Now, this is an interesting one. You pull the model up. So, I'm from Turkey, and what we know is celery is essentially celeriac. We tend to eat the, but now I live in Toronto. When people hear celery, they are actually talking about celery stalks, the green part. I have never seen anyone eat or consume celery. So I think in terms of the plant, it's just celery. You don't just say, "Oh, I'm going to plant celeriac." Celeriac is just the root's name. You are still planting celery plant. That's going to stay as celery. We have colored green. We will have cucumber. We'll have eggplant, of course. Love it, eggplant. Garlic. Some point is here and then garlic. Kale is in it, so we have leek here. We have lettuce, iceberg, and romaine, but those two will be a variety. So it is essentially lettuce. Um, I got nasturtium model done the other day. There is going to be companion planting. When you plant nasturtium with cucumbers, insects don't like either the color or the smell of certain flowers. So when you do companion plant, you reduce the need for insecticides or pesticides. So you don't need to spray your stuff. From the player's perspective, though, it's just fast forward the time, so we are 20 hours. I may have to open a new section, maybe herbs slash flower, because the point of this game is that you are keeping an urban garden, not for aesthetic reasons or as a hobby, but more like feeding your family. And flowers are nice to look at. In this case, though, it's going to help cucumber plant. It's not, so it should actually be flowers. Besides, some of these flowers, their flower part is edible, but I don't think herbs and flowers will constitute a big part of your. I will group those things up, which means that we actually put the flower Stimulus. With deal with, and I think I'll rename this file herbs flowers. Keep going. Lettuce, okra. For okra, we have onion. Onion is followed by parsnip. And then pea. Then comes pepper. Potato, that is good. Spinach. Swiss chard. Tomato, we have shovel turnip. But if I actually, that is good. Cloning it, so never mind. Um, Zucchini, last, and then there's one more thing that gonna look. So we have two models for wheat. Weeds will not be something the player will be planting. Therefore, there is no need to put this in a menu because everything we see here will be planted by the player. But we will have some other models like it's growing. So I need to create a different file to references. And maybe that will have its own set of properties. Okay, I think I'm making a mental note. Or mental notes are screwed out of my. What is the miscellaneous file? Really good at spelling miscellaneous. Yeah, this is where I actually stay here, and that's what I can pay attention to. It. I first writing, I this is kind of important because maybe in the game code I'm going to be referring to miscellaneous with proper key. and then a lookup will fail because this data in the JSON structure, maybe A and E will be first and going to look like I'm making the right call, but then there's a type miscellaneous. Now, not going to be oyster, going to be. Now we will most likely have miscellaneous items, just the organic items, and maybe other world items, like if it's like um, let's call it organic. Because how do you keep a bird? I'm actually making a different call right now. Flora. So then animals could be fauna. And you have non inanimate objects. This is like fence, wall, whatever. The animal stuff, the plant stuff, whatever it is. Giving me mushroom. So going to have, and here we'll actually separate the weed model. Okay, like we have two models here. One has this one is this thistle. Actually has these red buds. Let's try to grow. And then we have this broadleaf. Has this yellow pointy. So essentially we have two weeds. So we have the broadleaf. So then these names, like these will be more like icons. That is the workflow side. Okay. It's to be decided later. For now, let's just pretend we are doing vegetables. And let's also keep in mind that work I'm doing right now for a demo, we won't have varieties. So, meaning, we'll catalog here. Let's look at tomatoes. So the most basic example is maybe all tomato seedlings will look the same, but as they grow, cherry tomatoes, just normal tomato size. No, you have yellow tomato, heirloom tomato, different colors and shapes. To the looks like this. Of course, their final state will have to be custom model, but since we don't have those custom models yet, we could all pretend that it's always the same grown tomato. So when the real models are done, or the correct models are done for each variety, then we will have to come up with a more details. If the variety names will be like this, model names or the way I export them should match. So for the time being, I think for the time being, just going to pick two names from this catalog that has um, most conventional looking tomato color, one that actually different color. Now I will duplicate the existing model for the later stages, and I will maybe change the color. And for the demo, we will offer two varieties of tomato, and every other plant will only have maybe one variety. Those tomatoes are love tomato. Cool. Yeah, there's this variety I'm seeing, John Flam, French heirloom, has this persimmon orange skin and flesh. Almost looks like an orange. You rip off the green bits. And this mountain merit. Merit. It was actually super Italian paste a while ago. Let's see. Yeah, let's keep super Italian paste. Then there's mountain. Just going to write the description shamelessly from the catalog. Enjoy a giant concentrate. Comma there. Oh, giant concentrate. Bit of medium. It has one resist packages available. Seems like a weird sentence. Including to late. It also has two. Oh, sorry, will trace is zero. I'll just write it maybe because we will have pest and disease control too. Okay. But it's good to keep it. Built virus. And I think I was going to have resistance, whether it's a weak or strong resistance. We'll actually call it strong. I think Super Italian Paste has some things. Good disease resistance. We'll call it strong because part of this part of game design is that yes, there's all this flavor text, but how do you quantify? How do you turn it into game mechanics so that when you write the code, when the player thinks they are doing something, what are the values, what kind of code? Go back to the description field for Jean. May as well actually write this mission, which is 75. Other one is just 75. Why can't you keep this just string? Why do you keep this as changing? This salad, tomato, persimmon, orange. And I know I made a typo. Bush. The plants are fairly incredibly productive. Flavor is full-bodied with a hint of citrus and is maintained. They are dried. This is 410. That is unknown. Did not write. Again, that may be relevant or not. Feelings. Disease resistance, there is no mention. Unless it's mentioned weak or strong, I'll call it medium. So if there's any kind of random number generator that is checking values somewhere in the middle. Could go either way. Medium. Super Italian paste. Let's look at 360, and the maturity is 85 to 90. See, this takes longer to grow, but then it's for a specific purpose. If you want to make tomato paste, this is the kind you should grow. These choices will make. Also, this grows on a vine. Jean Flam also grows on a, but mountain meat grows in a bush. Preposition says bush on a bush. Let's write those qualifiers. It may not be relevant. It may be actually. Because generally, cucumbers, they like to climb up, hang on to things. So essentially, they are similar to the way some tomatoes on a wine grow. That will define the way they are attached to other objects. I either keep this information to notify the player that maybe they need an area where the plant will grow along that line, or that it's going to be a bush. You can always curve this data later. Yes, I'll say growing style. Mountain merit will be bush. Should be enough. And keep in mind, this is not going to be relevant for most other. There has to be some kind of, whether the plant we are putting in the seed is a growing style, what kind of style it is. Like peas will tend to like one, but then carrots will be just by itself. So it's like single grow bush, tree growing styles. And then you have other things that tend to spread more like herbs, because they are not like a bush but roll and spread out. Might be the fourth style. Um, because it would be kind of weird to pick the player to plant just say like arugula. It's going to try to spread. Well, it's going to occupy some zone here. Just plant the whole grown arugula. It's a whole want to see it grow. So we'll decide. This is all a moving target. But for now, I think this is what we can do with tomato. Like kettle of out. Um, back in here. I think this is kind of the beginning of the pipeline. Maybe today we are only interested in previewing vegetables. Now we are compiling a list of all. What is this? Type E. What the? Ah, excellent. Oh, I think I might have. Because when I duplicated, I always assumed it was going to ask me to rename it, and I was just typing it. His name was always. Oh boy, I think I started doing that sometime. Copied. Okay, so that's no cool. Okay, so data fix for these. because these will be for now just one. For the tomatoes, where I can pull again green cabbage, cauliflower. Vegetable, eggplant. This naming convention will also define the way I'm exporting the file. Normally I would write the, but I'm also taking advantage of the fact that this eggplant is going to be the key, and the keys are populating main groups. So that I'm not doing any more. Let's just capitalize it first. So it's for convenience sake. I think from this point on, did I? What I did. Oop, it has to. Let us change this. It's where it started. Starting parsnip, quick switch and here I started going a different. Um, potato. Pie. You can see some previous frustration in this. And finally, Mr. Zucchini. Looking one. Oh goody, I'm getting spam on question. Do I want to become famous? Nope. Thanks for asking. Yeah, let's use that add-on. We just hit export because everything else has been set up. I think I was collecting all this in here. Yeah, and then I was downloading everything in the file because if I individually downloaded it, then the next time I downloaded it, it was uh, instead of overwriting, it was 1, 2 between, and then rename everything so that I could do the data. So speaking of which, the other two files will stay the same. I don't quite care. So this is the one. Yeah, this is what we are trying to depend on. The other two I have not exported the spreadsheet into the. I will open this zip file and let's find the project data. Overwrite. So now I will run a script that will take these three files and I'm open to any suggestions that will make this process a bit fast enough. It's a lot faster than editing values in big ass file. You want to visually edit them easily in a Google spreadsheet, but this merging part is still slow because it still involves typing. Let's hit PowerShell, and now I have to remember how I triggered this file last time. I hit up. Okay, so I think I need to be going into the script folder in my project so that it finds this. In other words, I know I have data. Can I automatically run this? Pathmind. So then when I'm in console here, I already made Godot executable part of the path system, so that's fine. So all this is needing is, of course, it's going to copy path within the Godot engine as a resource path, not a full file system. Go in file manager. And I also run things here. I don't think lets you run. Let's go to the file system. Let's find the file properties. Here is the full path. Undo. I think I just paste this here. This may work. If it doesn't, I'll have to switch to the F driver. Source file not switched. Source file not. Yeah, this is where we have that. I think this has to be wrapped in this. Doesn't recognize it otherwise. File must be for you. The fact that it gave a certain number of errors here is the fact that it's actually trying to read the file, which okay. Yeah, this was the problem. Okay, now everything is because when I'm running this file without being in script folder, and I'm trying to reach the individual JSON file by trying to go to the parent folder, and now right now I'm in the F folder drive. There is nothing to go back up to. There is no such thing as data. This only exists in the scripts folder. So I suppose I have to go into script folder. I think I already have that here on the way. Okay, here's the scripts folder. So this is going to work for sure because everything. Just didn't want to do that every single. But I guess. Uh, or I'll just write the full path here. But again, this process, although it's fast, sure, it's not super convenient. There's room for improvement. So now we merge those three files, which is now in here. You can see it actually minified it. It's all good. So this is that big ass file now. We save this file and you. Yeah, this may seem redundant right now, but when you look under tomatoes, it'll make much sense. This tomato is the main item group under vegetables. When you click herbs, you'll see oregano, other herb types. So under tomato, these are the varieties you'll be planting. And when it comes to cabbage, you'll have green cabbage, red cabbage, that sort of thing. And if those green and red ones have their own variety names, they will also be listed inside the basic. They will be siblings. So the data structure is taking shape. It's good. Let's rerun. Now under vegetables, we'll have a long list. So right now our goal will be matching models to names, hitting the buy button, planting correct plant, meaning picking the correct model so that when the plant grows, we actually display the correct later phases of that particular plant. So we will do some blender work at some point. Should I start there right now or should I? Because I still have to figure out clicking and then permanently placing it in the world. I'm not going to write the constraints right now. I'll be careful to plant one here and then move the cursor to the grid, plant another one. Constraints are not our constraints for today. Because there was some conversation about that we are essentially in preview mode. And the user may cancel the preview by pressing the escape key. Did I also implement the right click to it? I did not. That exists only for this. Right click closes the lastly open. I may add this right click support to preview mode. This right click seems to be canceling. That's not a super important worry right now. I think I should focus more on this left click and what happens. The preview is going to be cancelled. and then we want to create a reference, the permanent reference of this in the world. So there will be some signal stuff. So let's go to our event bus. Start from there. It's essentially an entity. We are previewing it, we are positioning. Cancel the preview. Just do it this way. Oops. We will most likely have another signal turning. So type the now the word position there is kind of misnomer. I understand that so far we have used it for moving its position around, but could it also imply that, well, here's where I'm positioned, permanent? That sounds more like play. Because this is the conversation we, whether you use um, imperative words, just nouns versus simple, like past tense of the event. If you look at the node like signals for some nodes, I think you'll understand what. Let's look at none of this. Okay. See, mostly it's in past. So flags will be changed, something will be resized, mouse will exit, that kind of. But then you have things that are kind of in limbo. Like tree will be exited, fine. But then you might also be in the process of exiting the tree. Just before you exit it, there are gray areas like, and then you have simple things like this. You hide something, do something, draw on the screen. This is basically when something is being drawn, but you don't write it in the pen. So there is no set rule there. Most of the time you should write it in stance. This was sort of kind of a half-assed thing. So in that sense, past versus present, there is some distinction. I'm still positioning it. I'm previewing it. It's fine. Here where I actually permanently positioned it. So we are using the placed to mean its position. I think I'll go with this for now. The placed. I think that will be. So when we go into the preview, mouse events are tracked somewhere else, which trigger this preview script. Mouse events so far are held on. think I'll show you what. Let's run the game. As you can see, this ground area is triggering mouse entered and so close up view show you the fact that there's a ground object. Just this is a static body node is assigned this interactable, which is tracking whether the mouse is entered on this area or exit. This is just some dumb stuff that I'm doing. This is essentially what's sending the position of the mouse to the previous script. So the previous script knows when there's something to preview, it actually shows that model temporarily. So we should be detecting the click here and sending it to preview to say, well, okay, cancel yourself and permanently place it. Now, maybe the preview cancellation signal for the event might be sent to the preview. We may have to come up with a different structure that does the permanent, because um, because when you place the object, where do you place the object in hierarchy? Let's discuss that. This static body is sending an event, a signal, which is essentially sending it to a single. Then through here, it gets sent to preview. Because preview is listening to the signals that are triggered by event. So basically, static body is triggering a signal in event bus, and preview is connecting to event bus. So these two things are talking to each other through event bus. So essentially, neither of these guys know that they are kind of siblings. When we want to place an object in the game world, which is in this sample, our early decision was to put interactable items in this node here, and then other non-interactable things on group here. So essentially, some kind of reference has to be passed. So this sample level creates an interactable object. So we need to know the model reference sort of thing. We need to grab some water and come back. So I'm putting the stream on break screen, but I'll be back soon. acquired some chocolate and nuts. Or I have a long overdue lunch break. Let's so this actually has to be made dynamic. This mesh is never coming, or the reference. Entity. So when we move the mouse over, we are constantly running this. And this is only running when this is fired. This is triggered only when we buy button is in place. Yeah, the preview. This is triggered only when buy button is clicked. So because you wouldn't want to trigger the preview within position, because every time you're positioning something, I mean, it may be just running in the background. It's not doing anything with. When there's nothing to preview, it's if it still kept firing this, then you would always see a preview there. You don't want it. This will be conditional on the player will be moving an existing object in the world or something from the inventory, so we are previewing to somewhere. So this is fine. But what is going to be previewed has to be passed. Now that reference is the key, because it should most likely be a reference that is mapped to a scene. And the scene may have its own. I put some stuff under assets. They're essentially scenes, but they are not scenes in the sense that they are piece of code. They are holding references to models, like which may have their own other game objects. Like if at some point we are going to create a position 3D for cases like, well, here's a raised bed. This has an elevated part, soil, the top part. When a plant is put into the space of this raised bed, the plant's pivot point will be the bottom of the plant. So when it grows from the top of the raised bed. So this position 3D will be, where does it grow within this space? So in that sense, these assets are kind of game objects, not exactly. Could be. I mean, at some point this becomes an academic conversation. Now we could pass going to be awkward. It seems convenient. Nope. Because this is actually a pact. just but for this to work, all these models have to be loaded into the memory so that you could just say, okay, here it is, or you have to kind of reload it. This. And I think this makes much more sense so that when this is passed, okay, let's go with this model. I think there's some simplicity, if not efficiency. And this is going to be scene reference. Let's call it asset. Instead of adding this, eggplant itself will be like preload this bad boy. Here is going to be nope, nope, this one, and then going to be passed set. You have to create an instance of expected string constant as preload. I'm giving you a string constant. Why do I expected string constant? I think at this point we can't do a preload. We have to do yeah. This is going to run when you file. This is going to run at runtime. So you cannot be preloading stuff. I think that is where the message is awkward. They're trying to put something dynamic into preload. It's the whole idea of preloading because you know what you're here we want. Their message could have been a bit more human friendly. And now this should actually. Now the question is whether I actually keep it in a variable because are we going to do anything else? Just a throwaway. For now, I think it's a throwaway, and I this just work. Right? I think this is where I was thinking. Instead of keeping it like this, is when you create a node, it's essentially just var position in the node system. Then you can actually do, just for argument's sake, I actually want to use it's like so instead of doing this 3D. I think in transform what we are actually trying to do is the translation. Just and here I was doing translation. Oh, the preview itself. See, here's then how it goes. Instead of having a special node, this preview could be the position. So then your own translation is the preview. If as long as I won't be needing anything under this thing in the future, because this is all a work in progress. So this is fine. So then you don't need this. Bye. We kill you. Come here and we say you change your type to position. So you're still preview, but essentially you now have a translation property. You don't need to do this. And okay. And even in the future, I might get rid of this too. We'll see. This is resembling more and more process function. Because if we know this is happening, so just convert this to process. If event is previewing, update your translation. We'll see. Let's not over optimize. What was that line in code science? Optimizing early is the death of something. Something. You won't need it anyway, that kind of. So this should ideally work. As long as we are passing eggplant here, this should work just fine like before instead of hard coding. So when we do the intro, sorry, in here, when we do entity preview, is this, instead of passing null, now I should be passing eggplant. This should work. Run. And when I did the eggplant lowercase, of course, it's respecting only the current conditions, but this should actually change. Here is everything working. So as I said, this eggplant should probably be uppercase eggplant, but then this has different stages, so they all have to be decided and labeled properly. And then another point. When a plant has 5 or 6 stages, do you create one scene for each stage, or do you keep the stages under one scene? In this case, under asset, so that eggplant with the E uppercase makes much more sense that that is the whole eggplant business. I construct the node structure so that it shows each phase of the. So that when we make a call to the script that is assigned to the root and say, hey, display your next phase. That would also keep the number of scenes to a minimum. You may have to pass different variables, though, different arguments when you want to interact with the scene. Say, the default case, it's a seedling preview, but then maybe, yeah, we'll see. I think that model makes much sense that individual crafted. I pass pepper. This should actually pepper plant. Escape. Come here. Bye. Here's a pepper plant. Well, it was oh, okay. This is what I was thinking. This is I have to be cleaning the existing children because I'm actually putting both pepper and eggplant. As far as I recall, can't remove all children. Such thing as empty or clear. Get children only gives you an array. Kind of have to loop there. If anybody knows how to empty a node, deleting all its children, please let me know. But as far as I know, there is no such thing. It's a shame. Such a useful thing. I don't know why there is not a method for that. Because all there is concerning children is get them. And some event here when children are sorted. I guess this is now a good moment to visit our good old friend. Yes. So, I think I always did this manually, but now is the time to do a bit more high level. Remove all children. Remove children. We need to be past the node. Does that? So then you do this. Any node. Any node will have get children. So we'll do for child node get children. This is going to be an array. Each array. Can we actually remove? This is what I want to ask. I remember seeing remove methods for some node. Does that mean it just removes itself from the tree? Remove child. You need a node. Now that node might be the child itself. So could, since since utils itself is the extending node, when I say remove child, the only question that remains is whether the node that is being removed is part of the utils tree. Reflection problems. If I'm passing this, I have a reference to an object that is outside the utils node. When I make the call remove child, is this a system-wide call that removes this child of this node that exists somewhere else that I passed as an argument? Or is it trying to remove the child in utils? I believe the first one. Syntax will be okay because it's never whether it is logical. We'll see. Could also read document. This node is not deleted and must be deleted. because it means you have to free the memory. When you remove it, it's already been instantiated. It existed in memory. It was just part of a node. See? This might be useful. If I have only one child, I actually put one. But then after that, I replace it by another node. Might prevent this whole remove child to. I may also have to. I have multiple children, and I think I will need something like remove all children, because if I have a raised bed, I have four growing, and I just want to empty, like say, okay, just get rid of all the plants. End of year, you are doing something. You may want to. Let's actually test this. In preview, you are going to do utils remove. This is the default one. We are actually this. So I'll save this. Come here. Going to this. What are we trying to do? We are trying to remove this, guys. Now, I think any one of these is going to give the pepper. Okay. Now we have to go back to planting. Now we change this to eggplant. Save. Come. We say you can actually press escape. I don't care. Do that, and if I hit buy, it did not remove all children. It still put eggplant with pepper. I should debug this. When we get here, this self goes into here. What is this going to give us? Let's do that. I have red onion model. Red onion. Preview. Red onion. Just move the camera. Okay. Node. What is node? Object is the preview itself. But after the first iteration, step into what is child? Child is pepper. That is good. Was pepper, then egg. So it is clearly when we do remove child, root game sample level preview, that truly exists. Game so remove it. Why are you not? Go to the next cycle. Oh, I think step over. Hit the yeah. Okay, kind of understand. Cannot remove child node pepper as it is not a child of this node. That's what I was suspecting. Uh, Either the child removes itself or it actually accesses its parent. I'm kind of dumb. I'm already passing the node, so it knows what fucking children that node has. Just node remove its child. That's done. Already has it. I don't even need to do any lookup. The child's parent. This is the fucking parent. Boy, that was done. Get all your children and done. I don't even need a breakpoint. I'm confident this will work. Equipment thing. Any one of these will do the same trick. Here's red onion because we hard coded red onion. Let's look at it. Planting panel, come here, undo eggplant, do this while this is open. Uh, Hit another one just in case by, and it's the eggplant replacing red onion. Keep undoing. This kind of work. Pepper. Hit cauliflower by just pepper. So now we are satisfying condition of having only one item to. That's I was doing something. The permanent placement. Now that we are able to pass what we want to print, could we extend this step further? When the mouse click happens, we put that item in. Okay, let's visit Tractable, which is sample level static body node. Here are those three events. That's actually the level script which had the interactable stuff earlier. Here's interactable. Here's the level script. Anything right now? Let's see if we can actually do some kind of mouse event on static body. Turns out we could only track entered and exited, but mind you, this is also going to count as a, because we could actually do if event is, because we are doing the positioning for the preview. As long as there's something to preview. I think they are keeping this generic. It's actually working. What is pressed? Yeah, I remember doing. There's going to be drag operation. So much. Click here. What happens? Input event mouse button. Is mouse click event. Now, whether things will be clickable or not is this the different issue. So we could have two approaches here. One is always listen to mouse clicks and ignore things like subsequently, whether that click event go through or not. And things can be placed next to each other, inside each other, that kind of, or do that kind of check before and then just fire the result of. But I think the first method is you write the conditions after the mouse, only to ignore them. But if you do preconditional mouse click and then mouse click it successful result is also branching out, then you're writing two separate sets of conditions. Suppose this seems more straightforward. Something happens, deal with it. This mouse click will happen. Print events. Right now we're only doing that, but what do you want to do? What we want to do is event bus, emit signal. We want to do this. Conditions apply later. We want to interesting. When we are in preview mode and click happens, kind of know what we are previewing. Tell me. Go back to preview. As if what asset we are previewing. And that's actually first. Except when I emit this signal, who is going to connect to the signal? Who is let me break down what I'm thinking. In planting panel, right now we are hard coding pepper. This is what we want to ideally when we do mouse click, we want to put pepper in the scene. That's fine. Now pepper is passed to preview. All cool. And become that pepper asset becomes the first child of preview node. That's all good too. But some other mechanism needs to know that when the user clicks the left mouse button, that asset should now be kind of taken out of the preview node, put into the sample level interactable. There's going to be a temporary object under preview. It has to be taken out and put in. So some mechanism has to be listening to event bus entity placed signal, and that has to be passed either the string pepper or the node itself, the way it is already constructed and existing in. So this is where we have those blurry lines. They're like, is this looks like a pepper because it's a pepper string, but in terms of game object, it's meaningless. This doesn't correspond to anything. It's just something. I may have a model that looks like pepper, and this would be named something. Reference type. And ideally, you may want to keep things to a minimum so that you are passing just one ID around, not arbitrary, similarly named or similarly meaningful kind of things. And in the most ideal case, whatever this is one of these. Chocolate. This has so many implications. I'm thinking quietly here. If we really pass packed scenes around, how will that affect our save file? And how will that also affect action between other objects? Do you want to instantiate a new object with the existing properties? Do you want to just move the object that already has those properties, but then relationship with other objects will change, and how do you update other objects? I mean, in the most dumb scenario right now, writing, it's as simple as just displaying it. I mean, that's kind of the joy and the curse of programming. Like, you kind of try to fix the most imminent problem, but then when you do that, you're thinking of this problem because you don't want to paint yourself in the corner. But sometimes just need to get the work done, and then things either change or new possible solutions open. For now, let's actually first read the children here. So, interactable itself, by itself, this guy shouldn't know anything about its parent and then sibling and then first child. So, when entity is placed, yeah, it's as if now I'm trying to find the connection between this guy, this guy. If I put the listener here, this has to know that when a signal is fired here, has to find an asset here, so it could actually pull under itself. Um, and let's keep in mind that I'm only writing the vertical slice. Most likely, in this version of we won't be placing non-interactables in the game world. They will always be there aesthetically created. Mind you, you may never do that, but because I thought of a different scenario where these two things, this guy to sit from, but let's just stick with this. Most likely need. I already have any. See, that's also another. If I have a raised bed on when we have raised bed, so here's a raised bed, an interactable item. When I click it, it should most likely open its own menu. Access your list of seeds. Different interactable object will open its own text specific. Because even right now, you're actually kind of seeing a mouse entered is firing because on the ground interactable. When I go over this raised bed, which doesn't have the interactable scripted, it thinks I'm exiting the ground interactable. I'm back to the ground. So multiple items here will be cognizant of, will basically know that they're interactable. You'll be following under the cursor which object is. Um, which makes me think that this ground here should maybe under interactables. Well, it actually served its purpose so far. Still thinking out loud. Let's visit our website. If we want to create a scene like this, what is interactable? If I have the giant ass ground object, the whole interact, that won't make sense anymore because you wouldn't want this ground area here. You will want these raised bed areas and this flat soil part. So if we pretend that the ground is just a raised bed or small patch of land, that should actually be under interactables because we are quickly moving into that. Because house will be interactable to a certain extent. Some activities. Trees won't be. Maybe some of them will be. See. I will move ground in. Brilliant thing to do. Here should be just fine. When we run this again, of course, besides this, it should work just fine. Is mouse entered, exited, exited. I'm outside the game world. Re-enter. I think the only caveat here is this. There's a UI component here which is covering the game. That might be desired. That time is big. But yeah, we'll see. There's some UI stuff right. Handling the click through is not firing, or let's see. Game ground. But I was also testing. Work still. It should work because signals is fine. It's pepper. This is working. If I change the hard coded value to a different voltage. So then the next question was, when we do the mouse click, we are currently outputting the event itself. Let's still also double check. Just clicked here, and here's the event. Put event mouse button. Now, based on which interactable object cursor is, so say we have multiple items. So we have one raised bed, um, normal soil, maybe a pot, windowsill, whatever. So those objects will have a static body that actually has this script, which is then going to know object itself, where it is in the game world, that kind of. That's how we are previewing it. And then it's going to finally say, hey, whatever you are previewing, now it's as if you are trying to install that object into my object space. Which is now at this point, this guy needs to know something about if not about the preview, needs to understand the scene that is being. And I do not want to pollute event bus by creating a variable here that actually holds the reference. This is already awful. I mean, the dumbest solution is this. I really don't want to do the preview, but suppose when we do get root, was giving you the whole game root, but this thing, the level, and then does find parent works in Cursive finds the first parent of the current node whose name matches mask. Upwards in the scene tree, slow in large, deeply nested scene tree. Whenever possible, get node. I could actually keep the reference somewhere, but I won't be knowing the because these things will be their own scene. But if those scenes have some export variable, if they are past the reference to the preview, that's interesting. Indeed. So export are preview. Typeless export needs a constant expression aside. You are going to be a node. I think this is where I have to do get node something to. But then I don't need to export it because I'm not going to assign it. It's actually essentially spatial. Preview get child. Only problem right now, I'm not. See, right now this is hard coded. So I need to export this so I can assign the preview. When it's dynamically created, this has to be filled in. Either way, this architecture looks ugly. When everything is kind of handled over signals, why am I keeping reference of things inside each other? Might be getting to the point where it makes sense to keep preview node singleton. We might have different levels. Surely have. Each one of those levels will need a preview. Preview is globally accessible. Could be typing something just like this, so that I don't need to initialize asset under interactables only be past the reference to the preview. You, my friend, will be you're already your own scene. You won't be needed here. I'm pretty sure this will cause its own set of problems. Things may blow up soon. Um, but just like scripts, you could make scenes singleton. So then this will still be responding to the calls. Let's see if this shit, because all you are doing is loading something, or you're just listening to stuff. Now that this doesn't exist here, what are you on? Things blowing up so far. We planting, we hit buy, and so this might be a decent arc. And this guy's, and when we click, we'll have the event. Entity placed, nothing is listening to this, so nothing is happening. Where something has to be happening is here. Because this guy is sending the signal. Interesting. This kind of is, yes, okay. This was necessary for sure, but now I'm thinking, do I even need a global script here that actually handles the interactions between siblings here under all interactables? I might need it, but I might also write something like this. You know what? You're an interactable class. You know that when something happens with mouse events, you are responding to that. Well, when this shit happens, I have a function here that actually um, say if this was a raised bed, well, you need to be putting the arugula, the pepper seed inside your tree. So you are already in here. This just has to sort of communicate here. It could be put on stuff. So then this might be needed to save the files. Kind of know what, this is going to be under this object, so prepare the save file. That's fine. But within the class itself, you could already be handling the asset instantiation. Interesting. Interesting indeed. Punk, uh, give it a dumb name. Germinate. Well, did we pick asset as the asset? Germinate asset. Let's be consistent there. So the asset itself is going to write my note here. This signal is sent thing, but should be saved. And actually, if you go with the save model where each node is telling the main structure, this is my own tree, please prepare a save file respecting this tree, this may not even be needed. Asset. This is the asset. Don't print stuff or just germinate it. It's not going to find. This function is corrupt. Do preview, get here's the asset. Now our interactable objects, I have not decided should have a root node of spatial or they start with a mesh instance. They will most likely have this kind of structure. Next to this, there will be some height. I don't know it here. Somewhere here, I need. It makes sense that I actually start a new group spatial node. So then this script here basically says, hey, I have a sibling like this. Put it in there. Position information. Specific content. It's spatial node. Contents. You are going to have get node. Remember having some. And after we do the mouse click, germinate. That's it. This is on. This should only be responsible for germinating. That's it. I don't want to write anything like this here. I will write it and move it. You should be canceling. This could come after, before, doesn't matter. In this case, something does. But we just cancel it and then we, so if there's a split second, maybe the people will see the cancellation. Mind you, when we cancel it, we are not removing. See, this would have mattered if cancellation meant that we were removing the child, then there would be nothing as get child 0. But we are only hiding, or we are only hiding that preview node itself. This should be just fine. This stuff. Nope. Click it, preview it, put here. The fact that the preview has been cancelled makes me think that we have initialized that object. It exists somewhere in the world. I don't know just where. You can actually see that if we go under remote, here's that hidden preview with the here's game, sample level, tractables, ground, contents. No, I was correct in my assumption, but wrong in reality. this happened. This did not happen. This may not have happened for two reasons. Let's eliminate the first reason. Did you not find this? Or did you find it, but somehow this shit did? Oh, going to work. It will, because static body is the go up, and we could always debug. When we come here, what do we see under asset? If we see something, that means this has resulted in something. If this is okay, this is where it either here it's failing or it's failing in lookup. I don't think it's failing in lookup, because if it did, then it would give a, I don't know what a child of an undefined thing, so we'll see. Where are you? Add another thing. Here we stop. What is asset? Asset is an object. Asset is a pepper object. So root preview pepper. Such thing exists. Somehow you could not add child. This is where, so we do add child. Yeah, this is what I was expecting. If the child node already has a parent, it has its preview node. Function will fail. Use remove child first to remove the node from its current parent. For example, get the parent child, which is preview, which is globally accessible. That's fine. Just remove the poor kid and then add the child node wherever you want. And there is this owner thing. You want the child to be persisted to. Interesting stuff, man. Interesting stuff indeed. Now here, just abuse my remove what children, remove previous children. The asset itself is already a child. My only worry here, when you remove it this way, the way I'm doing, does it lose reference to previous get child 0 because that was in set, but it would not because it's already stored here and passed? Because if that imagine I'm hardcode, like this global thing. By removing it, I'm no longer removing the reference in still care. Save this, let it go. Bye. Because I'm kind of, all I'm doing is now an interim step where I'm removing something happened. gave an error. It's kind of, or it remembers the old breakpoint. So yeah, as I suspected, this is the part where it was be removed from. So I think it did. It's just that um, I think I just like an idiot. I put the pepper model inside the tree, and node view I can see the pepper incised in the contents. So let's rerun the program. Let's try this again. Here's pepper. This time there is no breakpoint, so if I click this, oh, okay. So it is good, but its utilization point is because when I'm doing this, I'm no longer passing this guy. Where in the world am I putting this? Okay, so let's move on to the next problem, which this is good. So um, these are all small wins. It's actually, this reminds me of that movie, The Martian. I think this was the line in the end. You know, the guy uh, he makes his way back to Earth and now teaching classes at NASA, and basically you solve one problem after another. Don't just sit there and say, okay, there will always be something. Just have to take it all in. Small victories. Should feel happy, of course, but there's always something that's coming. You have to be fixing the most imminent problems first. That's what we have done. So now if I plant more stuff, they will all be placed here. Our goal is to multiple interactable objects, multiple objects like ground, whichever one is clicked, we have to be instantiating the previewed object inside that, but also respecting its parents. And that position information is important and relevant to a certain extent because let me pull up some. We have things that climb, such as beans or cucumbers. This is growing in the middle of something. And for climbable things, this has to be sort of snapped at a flat, tall surface. So it's not always going to be some kind of like fixed or predetermined XYZ. It's as if that object itself will have a position 3D node. Will say, you know what? Under maybe this condition, start point is this or whatever, some kind of snap or initial position, aligning them. But the weed model. I think I will continue another 10 minutes, then maybe order food and stream until the food arrives, and then long break, almost 3 afternoon. So this is all cool. So Yeah, this is always an architecture problem. Say, tractable script is attached to a static body. Well, by convention, if this is an intractable object, you place the script to the root, then you have to write the events in the ready for the static body, and you have to connect to that static body's static body signal, and the event handler is written in a string that is actually part of that may work too. So we could actually move the script back to ground by only updating this signal reference. Because now we are kind of structuring this area. We have the contents area. Now we are discussing position 3D stuff, which is nothing but just a spatial node that actually has generic 3D position for editing. Just like you're playing spatial, but it displays. So you may as well put a spatial. Here's a spatial, essentially position. But I think the difference here is that, well, when you look at the hierarchy, you know this is like a coordinate. Um, Similarly, this is sort of forward. Um, we have a hose model, very basic hose model, an unwrapped one. Just want to quickly investigate. I think it was passed. In Godot, for these all like these will be named 3D similar to. So when you want to define a hose shape, custom bend here and there and then shaped. I believe this is how we can do that. Model is following a curve, and if it has enough geometry, maybe it will actually. And all these things will be handled under tractable. What else we might have? We will have storage boxes. Quick visual reference here. Storage box. This is essentially an inventory unit, but in a sense, it is another intractable item. When you place stuff in this, if this was a norm like raised bed, then the plants may pick this spot to start growing. But here things will kind of disappear. There is no real position. It kind of swallows it and keeps it in inventory depending on volume and such. But it is essentially an intractable item. So not all these conditions are applicable. Which means on top of being intractable, it also has to depend on object. So if you want to remember something from 2 hours ago, similar to the object type, we're discussing growing style. So this is an interest, but at this point it's specialized enough that it is actually a plant as growing style. This is kind of important because now you have two types of interactable objects. One is raised bed, the other one is a the plant is a much more specialized interactable item that now has a growing style. Now, if you want to plant a vine type plant along a trellis, those two interactable objects should interact in that sense. Otherwise, they kind of sit in the middle of each other. These things will be most likely built here. This function, this script make brings me to the point of maybe splitting it into I'm now devising another crazy plan. Plan is this for the discussion. Close the game. So it's forward. So it's new. So this sample level, I have to create this scene. There will be somewhat designed gardens. So I will already be placing connectable items just like this. The last thing I would want to do is to duplicate this stuff on change the mesh on that stuff. And because that kind of creation will be handled in the game itself when it's runtime stuff. So I may have to rely on Godot's tool feature where I have a script for the root which actually exposes a drop down to the inspector, and then instead of duplicating this shit I do something like this: create my own, instantiate my scene that comes with a tool that actually is running a script that lets you select a model. You say, well, you're a raised bed, you are this, you are that, and I just lay those major pieces around. Because why would I be interested in seeing all this in detail? Everything is just working. I should not be handling all these things. Only difference here is really this, actually. Challenge. This static body right now it is as wide as the cube itself. This collision shape is basically the shape of this. For different objects, how am I going to make this generic enough that these two things are going to follow the mesh? It's as if this should not be the mesh. This mesh should not be the root. There should be a different root for kind of like an interactable thing. And whatever mesh this is doing, that the static body and the collision shapes are calculated accordingly, and that it's easily extendable. So we are making it more and more abstract. Of course, if this gets in the way of completing the vertical slice in a timely manner, it's controversial. So there is some benefit to duplicating all this. Duplicating this once and just changing the mesh, updating the static body and the collision shape, that becomes like one different object. And then you just duplicate that object for other objects of that same type. Just create a separate object, and instead of one generic object, then you just do. Because this is actually a good win. This I have no idea what happened to you. Why this just left sound. Here's one model that so same shit. Just for argument's sake. Here's position 3. Okay, it's zeroed. Here's your position. It doesn't look correct. This looks correct. Kinda. Oh, okay. First of all, this is sort of like no, that should have been -5 or something. Oh, the scale is off. Because the ground object, in order to make it bigger, I actually screwed up the scale. And this is a whole other story why I okay, but I was quickly actually getting to a different point. Let's not mess with this. Okay. We are still 100. Position 3D. Just temporary. Don't care. Under interactables, I'm going to put um, some kind of mesh instance. So all but the chain. Essentially a raised bed. Something like this. Which is going to be for now a plain mesh. It would be a cube. Honestly, don't care. So it is going to be right here. This is going to simulate this area. This should have a static body. The static body should which should actually have a collision shape. And this is the work that I'm okay. This is naturally plane shape, collision shape, and it's also going to say that plane shapes don't work well and will thank you, and that will all change anyway. So this also has to be assigned script tractable. So this is going to have contents spatial. In a sense, I'm recreating the ground object. Perfectly aware of it. I will. I don't. This could just be here. Okay. This is actually make 0 raised bed, so it's right in the center of this raised bed. You could even have multiple positions. That's all fine. I think this is really like where I'm kind of, maybe that will have to be done with the code, or I'll turn it into a CNET. Because now I have to bind this event in this guy, static body, but you're not gonna bind yourself connecting from, and it's good. And this is where we are doing the cancellation of preview, and then child this good, and I think this may just work. Here's my raised bed. It's just planting regular this. So when I'm on this ground, if I click, it will put it here, because that's the 0 point of this ground interactable. When I put another Ergula on this, and it's kind of unfortunate that I'm already kind of there, but I'm hoping by being here, I'm not actually in this brown surface, but I was hoping to place it in this space. And maybe I am placing it, but then where did it go? Game sample level tractable. It actually, I think, so I think there's a depth problem here when planes are overlapping each other. I bet I was still in this. I think a way to just for testing. Let's just move this one unit up. Save filing. It actually now placed it in space. So the depth there is going to be important. Definitely. Things should not be accidentally over. Here's double checking raised bed. Pepper has been assigned. This is very exciting actually. Now we are individually initializing assets in other object spaces. Here's our pepper plant. I still have to work out the camera. It's still centering, it's still rotating around the 0 point instead of this. Speed up the game. Yep. I have to work out the lights. So I think by experimenting, I am a step closer to making this abstract of. And this is where I was discussing with it. It's Tractable sheet assigned to step might be just a semantic change there. The real problem there will be raised bed's model and shape of the collision, because that collision is responding to the mouse input. If the shape doesn't cover the mesh, usually your cursor will be over an object, but you are just seeing through and nothing. Things should also not overlap, otherwise you don't know which object you or that position 3D might be put into its own spatial group where you have multiple positions. I think I'm going to put the stream on pause. Maybe order some food off screen and make some tea, come back. So in almost 3 hours. Um, but I'll continue after I take this short break, and whenever the food comes, I'll probably stop and then have a separate stream starting later. For now, the short break. Okay. I am back, but I think I'm going to cut it very short. I just want to wrap it up because I didn't want to just terminate the stream. Need to make this call, and then the food will arrive, so things will get in this way. So where we left off before the short break, the sample ground model that I initialized, I started a long while ago, a while ago. Um, I'm trying to make it as abstract as possible. So the concern is to match the static body and the collision shape according to the instance. So most likely this is going to be the child of another node that is basically just an interactable node so that you could group them under. There's some conversation about making this interactable script part of that root of interactable scene instead of keeping in static body, but there is some benefit having it here. So we have some preliminary success here, initializing child objects inside interactable objects. So that's good. I think, yeah, really the next step forward is to make object interactions more abstract, because it would be very time consuming to create manually create these meshes. I know that the meshes will be, it is similar to the way that we are doing it in preview. Instead of having the preview of every asset, we are creating a duplicate sort of representation of model, and we are sticking it into preview, and we are just enabling the visibility of this preview node. It is in essence a similar workflow, but the only concern is because it's an interactable item, its collision shape has to match the mesh that is actually created. So for now, I'll terminate the stream. Um, I am guessing maybe at 4:30 Toronto time. I think I may start another stream, but this is what we are going to pick up next time. It's object interaction and maybe different objects in space of. So see you later.